Hello there and welcome to another video by Dan the Gaming Man. It's time for another top 10. I asked my subscribers which system they wanted to see me rank the games of next, thanks to those who voted, and the console in question this time around is the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES for short. I'll be listing my top 10 essential games, and as always there'll be a few honourable mentions too. If you enjoy the video, please give me a like. The Mega Drive one got over 380 likes, so I'd love to blow that out of the water. Also consider subscribing if you haven't already, it's very much appreciated. Now let's start the countdown. Number 10 is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Turtles in Time. I'm a massive fan of beat-em-ups, and as a kid I loved nothing more than the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles as they were known here in the UK. Arguably the best video game in the franchise, Turtles in Time is an absolute blast. You can play as any of the four turtles. I'm a Michelangelo guy personally, so I whiled away most hours with that pizza loving dude. The game is easy to pick up and it features many of the characters from the cartoon series that aired in the late 80s through to the mid 90s. It might not be the greatest beat 'em up of all time, and by that I mean it's not Streets of Rage 2. But then what is? But it is arguably the best on the SNES, and for that reason it makes my top 10. Have you ever played a game like Earthbound? It's just so unique. While most RPGs are set in fantasy worlds with characters that wouldn't look out of place in a medieval story, this game was set in a world more similar to our own and starred a group of seemingly regular kids. On the surface, this looks like a fairly normal or even quite a bland game, but as you progress through, what you'll find is it becomes more bizarre, and it's an adventure filled with sci-fi inspired twists and turns, which is more like Stranger Things than Final Fantasy. Now, I never played this in the 90s, as I suspect is the case for many people watching this, but its legend grew, and getting hold of a cartridge now will cost you a pretty penny. Luckily for us, however, Nintendo Switch Online and the SNES Classic Edition has made this game available to younger generations, or for those who are a bit older like me that just missed it first time round. It makes my essential top 10 because it still looks great and it's just so original. I can't think of any other games like it, perhaps maybe Undertale. But if you've never played this, do yourself a favour and get on it. Mega Man X is my number 8. The Mega Man games were among the best on the NES, and Capcom brought it across to the SNES in 1993 with this, the first in the spin-off series to the original. Players control X, an android member of the Maverick Hunters. It's a run and gun platformer that looks great, but one thing that made it fairly unique was that you could choose which order you completed the game's 8 levels in, which ended with a memorable boss battle at each stage. The game is included in the Mega Man X Legacy Collection, which is available on Switch, PS4, Xbox and Windows, so it's worth picking up if you're a fan of this one. Number 7 is Donkey Kong Country. The first time I saw this game, it blew my mind. We hadn't seen anything like this at the time. I know many people will point to the sequel, Diddy's Conquest, as being a better and more rounded game, but my nostalgia is for the original. There were some really interesting game mechanics featured in this game. The option to seamlessly switch between Donkey and Diddy as you went through was something I hadn't seen before, plus the rideable minecarts and rhinoceroses, swinging around using ropes, and being able to jump into barrels that shot you across the screen like a cannon. There were tons of levels to play through too, and the game featured a world map to help you track your progress. Rare put a lot of love into the development of this game, and it shows. I've chosen Contra 3 The Alien Wars for number 6. If you like run and gun games, then you'll love the Contra series. And is there a better entry than Contra 3 The Alien Wars? This game was a Nintendo exclusive, although Sega did get a Contra game in the form of Hardcore a couple of years later. This game is fast paced and it will take you a few goes to get going, as it is unyielding with enemies coming at you from all directions constantly. The Alien Wars still looks great to this day, and it's a blast to play in single player or with a friend in co-op as you take control of Commandos Bill Riser and Lance Bean, Earth's last line of defence against an alien invasion. The game is filled with power-ups that help make it addictive as you try to overcome the hordes of enemies. Contra 3 is the perfect example of a game that will have you wanting to just try one more time. Number 5 is Super Mario Kart. This is where it all began. Of course, the most recent entry to the series is the biggest selling game on the Nintendo Switch, but it all started here. The original featured just 8 playable characters, 20 tracks and 3 difficulty levels, 50cc, 100cc and 150cc. The races are fairly hectic, with power-ups that allow you to attack your opponents with slippery bananas and shells that you can throw. Super Mario Kart has a pseudo 3D look to it, which is made possible by the background rotating through something known as Mode 7 graphics, which made the game look fantastic. It also allows for split screen, so 2 players can race against each other, which of course is standard these days, but it was a fairly unique feature back in 1992. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past would probably be placed slightly higher up on the list for many viewers, and I'm sure that there are many watching right now who could make sound arguments for it to make the number 1 spot. And to be fair, you could probably name any of my top 4 as the best game on the SNES, but unfortunately I have to put them into some sort of order, and with that in mind, A Link to the Past takes 4th for me. This is a game that needs very little introduction. It's been ported to pretty much every Nintendo system since, having been re-released on the Game Boy Advance, Wii, Wii U, the 3DS, Switch Online, and even the SNES Classic Edition. So I'm fairly certain that everyone watching has played this one, even if they've never touched a Super Nintendo. A Link to the Past, like many on this list, has aged incredibly well. It still looks stunning all these years later. You take control of Link, not Zelda, and the game is more like the original Legend of Zelda, opposed to Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. One of the biggest updates is to the controls. You can move diagonally as well as up, down, left, right, A and start. Sorry, don't know where that came from. You explore the 2 overworlds, the light world and the dark world, and like any game in the series, you must clear dungeons and collect magical items along the way. It's just brilliant. Wait, is it too late for me to move this higher up on my list? For number 3, I've gone with Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Maybe I'm alone in this, but I always associated Mortal Kombat with the Sega Mega Drive and Street Fighter more with the Nintendo. This might be because I always thought of the SNES as being more kid-friendly, with bright, colourful characters, and the Mega Drive being for more mature audiences with its darker, more gritty games. Not that Street Fighter 2 could be described as kid-friendly, as it does involve flying around the world to beat the living daylights out of your opponents. There are so many editions of Street Fighter 2 that it can be a bit confusing, but I'm fairly confident that Turbo is the best version on the SNES. Disagree? Comment below and tell me how wrong I am. This is another title that has been ported to just about every system imaginable. If you're looking for a fighting game on the Super Nintendo, then Street Fighter 2 Turbo is for you. Number 2 is Super Metroid. As we would see with the N64 in the next generation of consoles, when almost every game title was accompanied by a 64 at the end, many of the games released on the SNES had Super inserted at the start of their titles. Now, I'm going to be honest here, I might have played this at some point in the 90s, I just can't remember. But it was actually when I got my SNES Classic Edition that I finally gave this game the attention it deserves. And wow, it blew me away. It feels fresh and it hasn't aged in the slightest. If you like Metroidvanias, then you should check out Super Metroid. Hold on, Metroidvania? You don't think... Anyway, this is a 2D side-scrolling action-adventure. You control Samus. She's a woman, by the way, if you didn't know. And you must search for a Metroid that's been stolen by Ridley, who's the leader of the Space Pirates. What a cool name for a gang. Samus is one of the best protagonists in video game history, and it is a real pleasure to blast your way through the levels. This might be number 1 for some viewers, but I have one game that just edges it to the title. But before I reveal my number 1 essential game on the SNES, let's take a look at a few honourable mentions. F-Zero. Much like Super Mario Kart earlier, F-Zero is a cool racer that makes use of the Mode 7 texture mapping to give you the impression that you're playing a 3D game. This futuristic racer is a lot of fun and probably inspired Wipeout, which was one of Sony PlayStation's launch titles. I think it's about time Nintendo did a reboot of this franchise. It's been 20 years since F-Zero Climax was released on the Game Boy Advance. Give this video a like if you agree. Final Fantasy 3, or should that be Final Fantasy 6? I don't know, I don't have time to get into that. This game, whatever I'm supposed to call it, is a must for any JRPG fan. With its huge cast of playable characters, 14 to be exact, and engaging narrative, it's the last one in the series to feature 2D graphics before the ridiculously popular 3D Final Fantasy VII. Wait, should that be called Final Fantasy IV? Oh, I give up. Just check it out, okay? And when you've finished Final Fantasy 3 or 6, make sure you check out Chrono Trigger, another JRPG developed by Square. This is considered by some to be the greatest video game of all time. I need to give this a lot more attention as I've only dabbled with it, hence why it only makes my honourable mentions. For the time, this game had features that we take for granted now, such as having multiple endings, side quests that developed the characters, not to mention its gorgeous graphics. Super Punch-Out is a game that is as infuriating as it is fun. Sure, it looks like it's taking inspiration from Saturday morning cartoons, but don't let that fool you. This game is solid. If you can master it, there's a ton of outlandish, wacky characters to take on in your quest to become the WVBA champion. Capcom made some brilliant beat-em-ups, such as Knights of the Round and Captain Commando, but none are as memorable as the Final Fight series, and for that reason I want to give an honourable mention to the third instalment in the franchise. Now, it's nowhere near as good as Streets of Rage, but if you were brought up on a SNES, then this would have been an acceptable substitute. And finally, Star Fox, or Starwing if you prefer. This has not aged well. Maybe the only game in this video that I would say that about, but if you were around when this game was originally released, I am sure your mind was blown as much as mine and my friends. It was revolutionary and a sign of things to come. I also liked Fox McCloud, another great protagonist brought to us by Nintendo. Okay, so that was our honourable mentions. So without further ado, it's now time to find out what I've chosen as my number one essential game for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. I bet you can't guess what it is. First, let me apologise. I'm sorry, I didn't come up with something more original, but the fact is, if I was stranded on a desert island with a Super Nintendo and I had just one game, I would pick Super Mario World. It is the essential game for the system, in my opinion anyway. If you boot this game up today, the first thing that strikes you is how well it is aged visually. It looks as good now as it did when it was released over 30 years ago. The addition of Yoshi, or Yoshi, allows you to take on levels riding him, don't be vulgar, or you can just play as Mario if you prefer. I do want to mention Super Mario All-Stars, which was a compilation released in 1993 and featured remasters of 4 earlier games. That game was my introduction to the earlier entries in the Super Mario franchise, but it was Super Mario Land that made me fall in love with the series. Now, I have a rule when I do these top 10 videos, 1 game per series. And you might be saying, but Dan, you put Super Mario Kart at number 5. Well, I always considered that a different series to the mainline Mario games. To be honest, if I didn't impose this rule on myself, you could pretty much fill most of the top 10 spots with Mario games, as well as All Stars and Super Mario Land. There was also Super Mario 2, Yoshi's Island, Super Mario RPG, but not Mario Paint. But as I have my rule, this is the quintessential Mario game, and for me, there's nothing better on the system. Do you disagree with me? Let me know in the comments and tell me what I missed. What would have made your top 10? Like and subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed the video. I'll be back with another video soon. Until then, stay safe and keep gaming.